All right, we are ready for our next case. Mr. Spano, would you introduce yourself? Tell us your name and your DOC number.
Good morning, Ms. Renata. My name is John Spano. My DOC number is 367260, ma'am.
Yes, and for the record, I did not state that we are now convening at Louisiana State Penitentiary. And so before we get started on your case, I'd like to have the staff there at Angola. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Deputy Warden Rochelle Ambo.
Reginald Admiral classification.
Jane Babel, offender record.
And everybody? Okay. And I'd like to ask your attorney to introduce himself for the record, please.
Good morning, Tanner Woods, here on behalf of John Spano. Thank you for y'all's consideration, and we're excited to meet the case.
Okay. And we'll usually do that at the end. Is that okay with you after the interview?
Yes, absolutely.
And also here with us in Baton Rouge, Mr. Spano, is family members Mark Peters and Jill Peters. And both of those folks want to speak on your behalf, and we'll ask you to do so at the appropriate time. First, I'm going to just read some identifying information, and then we'll start the interview process. Mr. Spano, as stated, your DOC number is 367260. You're here today seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in October 2006 in the First Judicial District, Caddo Parish, as a habitual offender for second-degree battery, currently serving a life sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Your case this afternoon has been assigned to Mrs. Jackson. Would you answer her questions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Spano. How are you doing?
Good afternoon, Ms. Mott Jackson. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Fine, thank you. How old are you?
I am 45, ma'am.
When do you make 46? Next month, right?
Yes, ma'am, in August.
11.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, so I'm putting you down for 46, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And how much time have you actually served in this case?
In this case, ma'am, I got incarcerated in 2002, so almost 20 years.
Okay, so this incident didn't actually happen until 2004.
Yes, ma'am.
You were incarcerated on the rape charge, is that correct?
That is correct, Ms. Jackson.
Which was ultimately dismissed as a result of your being found guilty of second-degree battery and being adjudicated as a habitual offender and receiving a life sentence. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So you've been in since 2004, actually serving time for this charge.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell us what happened, Mr. Spano, in the case that you're incarcerated for right now. Tell us what happened.
Ma'am, the attorney that I had assigned to the case filed ready and did all the paperwork. They removed that attorney right before trial, which was the weekend. They assigned me a new attorney, Mr. Ricky Swift. Mr. Swift came and seen me. He explained to me that he just got the case, that he was going to file a motion asking for a continuance because he did not file ready and there was no way that he could properly represent me. He did go in the courtroom and file the motion. They denied the motion. Also, he stood up, made an oral argument to be removed as counsel because he couldn't properly represent me. At the time, they denied that motion. When they denied that motion, I let my anger get the best of me, and I punched Mr. Swift one time, strike him in the face, which I do regret.
Why were you angry with Mr. Smith?
I felt as though that they was trying to mess over me, ma'am, and Mr. Swift did everything he could to help me. And at the time, I thought that the DA's office and Mr. Swift was working together, which after looking over the situation, I realized that Mr. Swift did everything in his power to help me, and I'm sorry for hitting him.
So you hit him once and he fell?
Yes, ma'am.
Did he hit his head on something?
I believe he suffered a cut in above his eye, ma'am, due to the punch. I don't know if it was from him falling. I believe it was from him getting punched, ma'am.
So, obviously I've got to ask you about the rape case.
Yes, ma'am.
What were the accusations against you in the rape case?
Ma'am, in that case there, I was dating a young girl. Her fiance was in the military. In the night in question that she said she was raped, it happened in my parents' home. My mother, my father, my sister, and her daughter was at the house. As you can look at my record, I'm not a good guy. And her husband, her fiance at the time, was coming back from the military, and she went and told the sheriff's office that she actually told her friend that I had raped her in my parents' home. And I went, did the investigation. I talked to the investigator. I took drug tests because she said I was on drugs and everything. I passed all that. I was under full cooperation, and it was her word against mine. There was no evidence. The sheriff's office arrested me for the charge. I pled not guilty. I stayed not guilty for almost 2 years, ma'am, going back and forth to court. And I'm still not guilty of that charge, ma'am. I did not sexually assault that lady at no time.
All right. Well, you're actually, they ultimately dismissed the rape charge, and it may have been because you received a life sentence in this case, but I'm not going to speculate on, the merit of the underlying charge, because I don't have that information before me. I do see that in 1996, you had an aggravated battery where you received a 4-year sentence. What was that about?
Miss Jackson, that was a fight in high school. I was my senior year. Actually, 1995 should have been the date of arrest.
How old were you in 1995?
I was a juvenile. I was 17 years old, ma'am.
And what happened in the fight that caused you to get an aggravated battery charge?
Me and a couple of my friends was out. We stopped at a gas station. We had got into a fight with a group of guys. There was a chain and a tire tool. Some of the guys got hit with different weapons. I threw a chain with a lock and hit a guy with it, and that caused me to get aggravated battery. I pled guilty to 4 years hard labor, ma'am.
So you were not probated, you actually served 4 years in prison?
Yes, ma'am. I never had probation.
You did not get a suspended sentence?
No, ma'am.
Also, in connection with that, there was a cruelty to a juvenile.
Yes, ma'am. In the process of the fight, there was a lady and a child at a red light. Someone hit the child. I took full responsibility for it. The lady said she could not identify no one.
Someone, either you hit the child or you did it or you didn't. So
I did do it because it was my actions that caused the fight, ma'am.
what happened to the child?
In the process of fighting, the child got struck at the red light. Like I said, it was a bunch of us fighting. and the child got hit.
That struck at a red light, that was a child in a car,
Yes, ma'am.
and the vehicle that the child was in got struck.
No, ma'am. I reached in the car and hit the child. There was another person in the car, and the child got hit in the process.
Now it makes sense. So one of the people that you were fighting with, have been fighting with, was in the vehicle.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. And then in 2000, you had a simple battery.
Yes, ma'am.
What was that about? You got
In-
30 days in parish jail for that.
And what was the date, ma'am?
It was 2000. You pled guilty to a simple battery and you got 30 days.
Yes, ma'am. That was a fight in the city jail. I pled guilty to 30 days. I was in the city jail doing time for a traffic ticket and another violation, and had a fight while I was in the city jail with another offender.
You also had in 98, you had a simple burglary where you got 15 months in DOC. What was that about?
Me and my girlfriend jumped the fence at a man's house out in the country and trespassed on his land and went into his cabin and was swimming. Nothing was vandalized. The sheriff department got called and come and arrested me for simple burglary.
Burglary of what?
It was a hunting camp, a fishing camp.
Okay. And then I saw another simple battery that had started off as a second-degree battery. It got reduced to simple battery, and that was in 1998. Remember that?
Yes, ma'am. That Miss Jackson, that one there was also a fight in a city jail. I was locked up doing time for something else and had a fight in a city jail and with another offender.
So why so many fights? Why so many crimes of violence?
Ma'am, for as long as I can remember, I had a problem with losing my temper. Most of the time dealing with arguments, and arguments lead to me getting into fights. I learned that was a main trigger in my arguments was cause my temper to have outbursts and everything, and I would get real upset. So with self-help programs, and I learned how to control it, help people instead of having disagreements, listen to people.
Let me ask you this, did you figure out why you were so prone to get angry?
Ma'am, I had my bitterness and everything usually came from arguments and disagreements. And like I said, self-help programs showed me that it doesn't have to be anger towards disagreeing.
Why were you walking around with so much anger? That's what I'm trying to figure out. What were you angry about? Who were you angry? I mean, why so much anger?
I didn't have anger, ma'am. It was mostly my temper.
Temper and anger are the same thing. What do you mean?
Well, I would lose my temper at different things and at arguments and disagreements. I learned how to control it.
And how do you control it? Tell me how you control it.
I control my temper, ma'am, by positive thinking. I listen to people now instead of arguing. I offer self-help, and I learned that you don't have to argue or disagree with somebody. You don't have to result in violence, that you can be a better person.
I do see that you've only had one write-up that was in 2009. It was for a contraband. What was that about?
That was stamped envelopes, ma'am. I had in my possession stamped envelopes.
Where'd you get them?
I got them out the canteen.
Purchased them?
Yes, ma'am.
They sold them in the canteen?
Yes, ma'am.
Why was that contraband?
Because they said the amount that I had in my locker box.
What did you have?
I had, I believe, 400 and something.
Okay. Why'd you have so many?
Mailing hobbycraft out, writing letters. Guys get stamps and don't need them, give them to me. I wrote a lot of letters, mailed a lot of hobbycraft out to my family. I did not realize that they was contraband, and they actually gave the stamped envelopes and everything back to me after I pled guilty in court.
You've been a minimum age trustee since 2015, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What's your job at the prison right now?
I work maintenance, ma'am.
Specifically, what do you do?
Air conditioning, refrigeration, and carpentry.
Okay. And I do see that you got a letter of commendation from the maintenance department supervisor.
Yes, ma'am.
You also have very positive remarks on your institutional record. So I see you've only taken correct me if I'm wrong, you've taken 100 hours of pre-release, cage arrays, and living in balance 1 and 2.
Yes, ma'am, and I am currently thinking for a change
How long have you been involved in thinking for a change?
for 4 weeks, ma'am.
You took living in balance, which is the substance abuse program. What were your substance abuse issues?
My substance abuse issues was drinking, ma'am.
How old were you when you started drinking?
Say 15, 16, hanging out with older friends,
What kind of drinking did you do?
mainly beer, ma'am.
How often were you drinking?
Usually on weekends, Miss Jackson.
Did ever progress to other alcohol or to drugs or to more frequently than on weekends?
No, ma'am, it never progressed to drugs. I had never had a drug problem. But once I got older, I started going out after work, drinking with friends on weekdays and stuff like that, Miss Jackson, but never heavy drinking.
How many days a week did you go out drinking?
Maybe 2-3 days a week,
Plus weekend?
plus weekends, yes, ma'am.
What do you call heavy? That sounds kind of heavy to me.
I'm heavy drinking is like what I would say drink all night long. I wouldn't do that because I always had a job. I would go out for a couple of hours, drink, and then go home.
What did you learn about your drinking habits and living in balance?
Ma'am, I learned that even social drinking can be a problem if it's not controlled. I learned that when you social drink, and as I did, if there was an argument or anything like that, it would lead to me getting into a fight or me leaving a bar or someone's house mad or losing friends over that. So I learned that I attend classes weekly here in Angola and express that and help other people dealing with that, and they help me. I did learn that, ma'am.
So you do see a connection between alcohol and anger and temper.
Yes, ma'am.
So how do you plan to avoid that?
To prevent that, ma'am, put myself around positive people, continue go to church, continue working, and just avoid drinking, period. I don't need it in my life. It's been destroyed most of my life, ma'am.
Well, how are you gonna be able to avoid drinking? Because friends are gonna want to go out. You'll be at social events with your family. There'll be beer and maybe other liquor. How are you gonna avoid drinking? It's gonna be all around you.
Well, ma'am, I can avoid it by drinking Coke, drinking Dr. Pepper, drinking water. I do not have to socialize with people and drink. I have learned that. I can socialize with people and drink water.
Have you taken anything like AA or NA?
We do a AA program nightly at Camp F, ma'am.
How? Go ahead.
I go up there and fellowship with the guys and fellowship with them outside of the AA.
When you say fellowship with them, what do you mean?
I mean, sit down, talk, discuss problems, discuss different situations.
So you're actually participating in the AA meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you think AA or NA is something that is important for you on the outside?
I think AA is, ma'am, and I think people with positive outlooks and on life and just in general is. Church, I attend church services, Cowboys for Christ at Camp F. There's all kind of services that have positive things in them.
How important do you think it is to attend AA meetings? As part of your plan to maintain sobriety?
I think it's real important, ma'am.
So tell me, because when I asked you what was your plan, you kind of didn't mention AA, you mentioned church and people. Didn't hear you mention AA as being part of that sobriety plan.
Well, church, the 12-step program it's church based and it's founded on that. So church, AA goes hand in hand. I do think that both of them are real positive. If released, I will attend both of them, ma'am, because I need that.
So let's talk about your transition plan. If you were successful, where would you live? Where would you work? How would you support yourself?
Ma'am, I have a skilled trade of heating, air conditioning, refrigeration. I also have an EPA hazard chemical license that goes with the refrigeration. I have a resident plan at my sister and brother-in-law's house. I also have a job reference plan with a guy that owns a construction company. I would support myself by getting a job with him, and I would live with them.
Them being?
My sister, Mark Peters, my sister, Jill Peters, and my brother-in-law, Mark Peters.
Warren, what can you tell us about Mr. Spano?
Okay, I can tell you that Mr. Spano is a Class A trustee. He have worked outside detail. He has did renovations at the governor's mansion, and he's also, when LCIW was moving to Jetson, he was part of the work crew that renovated the Jetson compound for the women to be transferred there. He helps with renovation of houses and repairs of houses on the B-line for the B-line community, and he also do air condition repair. And he is in AA. Only one DB report, and it was the one that you spoke of. And I heard him say that they gave him his stamps back, but they only gave him the $50 allotted limit for the stamps. The rest of them they confiscated.
All right. That's all I have, Mrs.
Okay, thank you. I have just a couple questions for you, Mr. Spano. just listening to you. Tell us, when's the last time you got angry?
The last time I got angry was about 3 months ago, ma'am, and I got angry because it was at a job and we was doing an install and somebody wanted to do things their way because their way seemed easier for them. And it would have been easier for me to do it my way, but I compromised with them and let them do it their way. And eventually got the system hooked up and then came back later on and showed them how the book says do it and explained to them after everything got calmed down. I resolved the situation by doing that, thinking instead of acting.
All right, good. So I was gonna ask you the last time you disagreed with someone, but I guess that was it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. What kind of hobby craft do you do?
I do metal work, ma'am,
Okay,
metal, jewelry.
all right. I don't have any other questions, and I want to acknowledge that we have also on Zoom your sister, Miss Diane Sprayberry. We'd like to hear from you now, ma'am.
Hello.
Yes. What would you like us to know?
I would like you to know that he means a lot to all of his family, and that we know that over the years that he has changed and he has tried to do better. And that he is very family oriented. And I would like for you to know that if he is granted his pardon or parole, that we will do everything that we can to help our brother stay on the right track.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your remarks today. And we'd like to hear from
Thanks.
the other sister. Could you step up to the podium?
Thank y'all for letting us be here today. I just want to say that we think that John needs a second chance because he's done so good and they've only been there 23 years. It's been very good. Got all his certificates, so I think he's ready to be out in the world to show what he's got. And we'll take care of him, don't you worry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Peters.
Thank y'all for making this today, and I just want you to know, thank y'all and the system for changing this man, making him a real man instead of a young, angry fool. And we have seen it every time we go down there, we get acknowledged how good he is and how well he participates with everything. And the system does work, whether people believe it or not. He's living proof of it. And I just want to thank y'all for giving us this chance. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. We do have also on Zoom is Mr. Ricky Swift. Yeah, he's still there. I have an indication that he does not want to speak, but I would give you that opportunity, Mr. Swift, if you'd like to say a few words. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to say briefly, in 30 seconds or less, that I did represent Mr. Spano, and I heard what he said. I would differ that I was not prepared, but I was trying to assist him in getting his case continued because that was his request. However, many times the defendant will wait to the last minute and tell the court that they plan on hiring an attorney. And that was actually the situation, that the day of trial, Mr. Spano announced to the court that he was hiring an attorney, and the court gave him an opportunity to have that attorney come in and represent him. Of course, that didn't happen. So therefore, the court denied the continuance based on it was an attempt to delay the trial. And lastly, I would like to let the panel know that Mr. Spano had every opportunity to go to trial and prove that he was not guilty of this rape. The reason he hit me is because he knew the evidence against him was overwhelming, that he would be convicted, that once he's convicted, I informed him that he would be multi-bill and receive a life sentence. And that's why he panicked, because he really didn't want to go to trial. So he was looking for a way out, and his way out was to hit me in order to avoid being convicted of the rape. So that's all I want to say.
Yes, sir. And we did receive your victim impact statement that you submitted earlier. We have that in the record. All right, before we turn it over to Mr. Woods, Mr. Spano, is there a statement you'd like to make?
Ma'am, the statement that I would like to make is, I am on the backlog list for victim awareness. If I would have completed that course like I did apologize to Mr. Swift. I want Mr. Swift to know that I am truly sorry for hitting him and disappointing my family, ma'am. The people that care about me the most, I let them down.
All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Woods.
Thank you all. Let me start by talking a little bit about who Mr. Spano is. And I haven't known him for all that long. We just recently got hired. But I feel like I know him from the conversations that I've had with him already. I also grew up in the Shreveport area. And so I feel like I know this area. I know kids that went to Southwood High School like Mr. Spano. And I will say that most of the kids that I know at Southwood High School got into a fight or two in high school. That was, it is a very country sort of rural school, and fights happen, things like that happen. And I have no doubt that Mr. Spano, and I'm sure that he would agree with me, that he was a rowdy, rambunctious, high school kid. He got into some fights, he made some stupid mistakes, and his brother-in-law, who's actually been now with Jill for a little over 38 years, has been with him since they've been together since John was 12. He was one of the main, role models for John. He was telling John all along, that you got to stop this, you got to stop getting in all these fights, you got to quit getting in trouble. At one point, I think he even kind of predicted the future and said, quit getting in trouble, something bad's going to happen. You're going to wind up in jail for a long time. Mr. Spano, unfortunately, didn't learn that lesson early enough. And he found himself on trial. And I just want to go back to that morning or the evening before, the first time that he's ever met Mr. Ricky Swift, his defense attorney. He's going to trial for an aggravated rape charge the next morning. Mr. Spano knows, and he's got 6 witnesses. He was talking about him here today. He's got 6 witnesses, 2 of which were out of state. And that had been filed in motions indicating that they needed time to get the 2 witnesses from out of state here, and then he had the 4 witnesses that were in town. He had a defense that he wanted to present. Mr. Ricky Swift had not been on the case long enough to understand that defense. And he panicked. He panicked. The motion for continuance was denied. The motion to withdraw was denied. And he panicked. And he made the worst decision of his life. I would ask y'all to not hold the rape charge. And it really is surprising to me that his own defense attorney is holding a rape charge that he was not found guilty of and that was ultimately dismissed. And he is arguing here today that that rape charge is the reason that he should spend the rest of the life. And I don't think that's true. There is a reason that the rape charge was dismissed. They could have continued to prosecute it. I know that if any of my family members were a victim of a charge like that, I would still want to prosecute it. I don't care that he's already been sentenced. I would still be pressing that it should be prosecuted. I think that the fact that it was dismissed shows that they were looking for the easiest and quickest way to have him sent away for the rest of his life. He has done more. There is not anything else that he could have done since he's been incarcerated. He's had 1 write-up in 2009 over the 22 years that he's been in Angola, which is impressive in and of itself. He has worked a plethora of jobs. He's worked in the governor's range. He's been allowed to work at the rifle range around guns. He has been giving the most trust that any inmate in the facility could be given. He's a Class A trustee. He was even authorized to go off of Angola's campus to do different HVAC jobs around the state. So I believe that all of this weighs heavily in the favor that he has learned a lot over the past 20 years. He is not the same person that he was. He has learned how to cope with his anger. He's learned how to deal with disagreements. And I believe that he deserves another chance.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. All right, vote ready, go.
Yes.
Mrs. Jackson.
All right, Mrs. Spano, I wrote on my notes, we'll decide after the interview. Decide after the interview. I wanted to hear you, wanted to see you, wanted to see how you reacted to things. I'm impressed by the fact that a person who has had so many issues with anger in the past and has spent your incarceration in Angola, and you only have one write-up. And that wasn't even for fighting or anything related to anger. And to me, that was impressive. You've only had one write-up. Your institutional record is good, and you had very positive comments from your evaluators. You had very important, very positive comments from the maintenance department. And so my vote would be to grant your request and recommend commutation sentence 99 years.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson.
Mr. Marabella.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Spano, I've listened intently to what you had to say, and I've been in the criminal justice system for 50 years, so I understand how trials work. I understand how defendants and public defenders often have conflicts, and lawyers want, defendants want them to do more than perhaps what the lawyer can do. So I can understand how that was a disagreement. They did drop the rape charge. Don't know why, as Judge Jackson said, don't know why they dropped it. Maybe because they were going to get you with this charge, but they tried you for this charge as opposed to the rape charge. The rape charge was that strong. It seems to me they would try to that, but that's just my opinion. You made a excellent presentation today. I think you've had a good prison record. My vote likewise would be to recommend the governor that he commute your sentence to 99 years.
Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Rulo.
Colleagues, and I also vote to commit your sentence to 99 years.
All right, Mr. Spano, for all the reasons that have already been stated, my vote is the same. So on your behalf, sir, we're going to make that recommendation to the governor that your sentence be commuted to 99 years.
Thank y'all. Y'all will not be disappointed.
Thank y'all.